Hey there gamers, DreamcastGuy here. Today I want to talk about Resident Evil 1, the original Resident Evil 1. There's been a lot of debate as to whether or not this needs a remake, because we are in this very interesting, almost renaissance of horror, but specifically about Resident Evil. It is crazy that this last 10 years, seeing the explosive popularity of Resident Evil 7, the rebirth of things like Resident Evil 2 Remake being such a masterpiece, maybe one of the best remakes of all time, it's been interesting to watch that Capcom has not only managed to reinvent the entire horror genre, but sort of reestablish the Resident Evil timeline. And in some space, some people are saying that they're super happy to see the fact that Resident Evil isn't just playing it safe. I mean, I just finished Requiem about an hour ago for the 4th time, just doing a speedrun for it, and Resident Evil 9 is such an experimental project. 2 separate main characters that play 100% different, one more scary, one more action-focused, and somehow making a story that is not only cohesive, but fantastic. So there has been rumors that the next couple Resident Evils are going to be a remake of Code Veronica, a remake of Resident Evil 0, and after that, we'll probably get Resident Evil 10, and people are sort of debating, do we even want an RE1 remake? Would it really be necessary? So I wanted to throw in my hat and give 2 cents because I decided to actually go back and rebeat the original Resident Evil 1 this weekend. I beat it quite a bit and I loved it, but I think I am now fully in the camp RE1 needs a remake. And let me explain. Hi, hope you're having a great day. If you could please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now I have to admit that the inspiration for this is I saw this tweet by Synth Potato that actually pissed off a lot of the internet. And I was surprised by the amount of anger it stirred up. Now, let's be clear. He is saying he thinks this does not need a remake. He is very much in the camp where he thinks that a remake would be fantastic. It'd be really interesting to see how they change it, how they warp it, how they add on to it. But he is basically saying it is not needed. Somehow, 99% of the internet is screaming at him about how he's saying that the game needs a remake. So I want to make it very clear. I am disagreeing with Synth Potato that I think that as good as it is, I am curious to see how they do it different because each of the remakes has actually been pretty substantial. And that brings me to what people are happy and scared about. It seems like a lot of people that are the most afraid of the remakes is that Resident Evil 2 Remake, 3 Remake, and 4 Remake have been incredibly top-selling and incredibly beloved games. Well, unfortunately, not RE3 Remake. Resident Evil 3 Remake cuts about 40% of the entire game, including the very legendary Clock Tower section, which is undoubtedly the best part of the original game. It is a very strange remake, but a lot of people are also feeling weird about the fact that Resident Evil 4 Remake, some people felt like it streamlined it too much. Personally, I disagree with it, but the remake of RE4 really did sort of dumb down a lot of the puzzles and stuff like that. It still kept the jokes. In my opinion, RE4 Remake to me is a much bigger, much better product. Some people are also a bit nervous that the original RE1 has a specific style of horror and style that the current games don't really try to get close to. Now, I think it's interesting that current Resident Evil is both scary and still manages to actually have a lot of that cool horror and weird, like, science gone wrong mythos that has been there since the very start. But I always felt the original Resident Evil 1 more than anything else. And of course, the remake, this is actually the original Gamecube remake, just called RE Remake. This game, I feel like it had a style of sauce that they just don't have today. This raw terror of cops trapped in basically a completely unwinnable situation. And replaying it this weekend, I decided to replay it again on PlayStation 5 actually. And while playing through it, honestly, it still looks incredibly good. But the thing that kind of struck me the most isn't the tank controls being bad or the voice acting being bad or even the graphics being bad, is the sense that there is a lack of connectivity. Now, what I mean by that is that as cool as this is, honestly, it's fantastic. I still think the puzzles in the original Resident Evil games are actually brain scratchers. There is definitely a sense that with these remakes, now that we have like fully 3D realized maps and the fact that honestly you have so much ability to just turn and look and stuff like that, part of the difficulty of those old school Resident Evils was that fixed camera angle. Not only could you not see the next zombie around the corner, but a lot of times people seem to get disoriented by trying to remember, oh, I need to take this many left turns. Like you have to build a much more like 3D representation of those retro games in your head. And I like both old school Resident Evil and the remakes, but I feel like Resident Evil 1 specifically, I think has the most potential for growth by getting the 3D remake treatment. And I was actually thinking about this weekend while doing my 4th playthrough of Resident Evil Requiem, which is, I was playing as Grace, and if you haven't played Resident Evil 9, what's interesting about it is that Grace and Leon play 100% different. Grace is almost, in a way, very much harkens back to that Resident Evil 1 vibe. Never enough bullets, lots of monsters where literally a single zombie could kill you. If you're playing on the modern version mode, it actually lets you save a lot. But if you screw up, a lot of times if you're playing on the Cine, checkpoints won't save you. I like the fact that, honestly, Grace's section feels like this interesting reimagined era of trying to play through old school Resident Evil. But what works the best, I think, is this connectivity to it. Now, why do I keep using that word? In the current Resident Evil games, obviously now we have the new RE engine. Now, RE engine is honestly not just graphically great, but it allows us to play these games without load screens. Something old school Resident Evil did, obviously, was these hidden load screens via basically having like a door opening animation. Looks fantastic, very good, but now that the games basically are technologically allowed to be fully one big chunk, there's something about the fact that when Grace runs from a zombie and I'm getting chased room to room to room, not just a boss or a mini boss or something like that, but when there is an actual zombie that is straight up chasing you where you didn't think it could go, it is so powerful and so effective to making you feel so deeply unsafe in a way that I feel like Resident Evil hasn't been able to do for a bit. Where Resident Evil is like fun and spooky, but there is a sense of like stocked paranoia inside of the Grace gameplay of Resident Evil Requiem that to me is so incredibly effective. And now, after doing all those playthroughs of Resident Evil 9, going back and playing the OG Resident Evil, it almost kind of made me want that more than anything else. That to me, I want to see the Spencer Mansion from Resident Evil 1, but now as one big connected map. I want to be able to literally go from the graveyards to the patios to the experimental labs up to the surface and just see all of it as one big fluid map. And I honestly think that something obviously the remakes have been doing is what they call stalker design, right? And also Resident Evil 9 had this. There's like a big crazy monster called the Girl that stalks you for big chunks of the first half of Resident Evil 9. And it's cool having Mr. X, having, Nemesis, being chased by an unkillable monster is something that is incredibly effective. And I almost think that it would be interesting to see how they change Resident Evil 1. Now, why is it that I'm referring to changes, right? It's the fact that with a lot of these remakes, what's been interesting is that the original timeline of Resident Evil was very set in stone. The events of the original trilogy, there was a lot of different spin-offs and stuff for the Resident Evil timeline. And all of it has been very much set in stone for the most part, right? We knew that Outbreak happened. We knew all these different characters, Hunk. We knew everybody that was basically able to escape Raccoon City. But with these remakes, not only have they been remaking the characters, the vibe, and the setting, but they've been slowly remaking the timeline, basically setting up a new canonical, finalized version of the Resident Evil universe. And in a lot of ways, I feel like the streamlining has made the stories and characters a lot more fresh. Like, honestly, I feel like these new interpretations of the characters are so much better. And I say that as a mega fan of the original, but I'm kind of curious because when it comes to Resident Evil 1, it's always been a little bit of a question mark, simply because not only do we have two separate versions of Resident Evil 1, we have the one on the original PlayStation, and of course we have the one on Gamecube, and this, even counting the remake, what I always thought was interesting is that it sort of seemed like both were canon. Both seemed to sort of say it, because no matter what happened, people would always just refer to vaguely as like the Resident Evil Spencer Mansion incident. The Spencer Mansion incident in the Arcalay Woods, right? It was always sort of this thing that was just referred to because the tragedy of it was all the STARS members that died. It wasn't necessarily about the individual elements to it. But I think I'm curious to see, take me back there and now show me the final concrete timeline. And I want to see some expansions of those characters. And I've actually seen some people to talk like this, right? Call me a tourist, I really don't care. I have played the HD Remaster of Resident Evil 1 on Gamecube. It's very good, but absolutely no amount of Resident Evil purists screaming in my ear can convince me that that game should not be getting the same treatment as Resident Evil 2 Remake. In fact, I think this game being on RE engine on modern packaging would be even better than Resident Evil 2 Remake. Given that Spencer Mansion over-the-shoulder slop form, please, I'll eat it up. Here's the thing people are talking a lot about. Honestly, it would be interesting to see how these games exist, but here's one that really, really stuck in my head, right? I think it'd be interesting. It's high time we got a version that makes both Barry and Rebecca's arcs make sense with both Jill's and Chris's stories. Barry just outright disappears at the start of Chris's stories and you never see him again. And I do think that this is an interesting thing, right? Which is that, honestly, Resident Evil 1, in a lot of ways, is very terrifying. And the remake we already have is so freaking fantastic. The HD Remaster we have, it has a lot of monsters that are legit actually scary. Like the Crimson Heads are actually scary. I kind of want to see that version, but made in RE engine, right? I want to see Crimson Heads that will actually wake up across the mansion and come running if you make a sound. I would love to have the stalkers not just be one individual thing. I would love if there's tons of different stalkers all coming at you throughout the entirety of the game. But more than that, I would love to see the characters expanded. Claire and Leon have really changed in the remakes we've been getting, right? And I think they've made them darker characters. And it's very, very good to see. I think I'm super interested in this Code Veronica remake that apparently is getting revealed this year, released next year, because we're going to get an even deeper dive on how much they've decided to change, in a lot of ways, improve Claire Redfield, who was already a character that was so incredibly good, but it's super curious to see how much they're just building onto the timeline, and all of it's good. You know, I'm going to end this with something very philosophical, right? Something kind of just off the cuff. There is something very interesting about Resident Evil 9 that's been sticking with me, which is Leon Kennedy walking up to the destroyed Raccoon City Police Department. Now, I'm an old man, right? About to turn 40 here in May, and I feel a bit odd because, honestly, getting older feels great. It feels cool that I'm, been alive and been able to do this job for 13 years and stuff. But when I was a kid, when I first saw Leon Kennedy in Resident Evil 2, the old school Resident Evil 2, that was the man I wanted to grow up to be. You know, this hero willing to put on a uniform, to go out there to just save the day. I thought Leon was not just the coolest character of all time. He's somebody that I aspired to be. And in a weird way, playing Resident Evil 9 and seeing old man Leon, it really is hitting something inside myself that makes me feel like this entire series, it matters. I do feel like, even though this is just video games and stuff, something about it is interesting to watch the next generation now. People half my age playing Resident Evil for the first time, starting with 2 Remake, 3 Remake, 4 Remake, now playing Resident Evil 7, 8, now 9. There's something about this series that I think has become extra timeless and is so true to form. Leon Kennedy, Claire Redfield, Barry Burton, Albert Wesker, these are not just characters. They're more than that. They're almost these like icons. It's been interesting to watch how much Resident Evil has aged and improved over the years. And if they decided to do an RE1 remake, even if it did giant swing for the fences changes, I think I'd fully support it. Because at this point, I'm kind of curious where even if they mess up, I'm curious what RE is going to change into next. But that's just some off-the-cuff thoughts. How do you feel about the idea of Resident Evil 1 getting another remake? And tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please keep dreaming. I don't remember what this was supposed to be. What is this? I have no idea what this is. A girl stamped me last night, and I cannot remember what the hell this is. Is that a paw or a star? Oh, well, who knows? Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.